This afternoon, we're talking about less stress and learn more strategies to empower your anxious student for a smoother school year. You know, for the last 26 years, my team and I have been helping kids to do better in school, whether it's a subject tutor, somebody said math and science, somebody else said writing, or it's an executive function coach. We want to help kids feel more confident, less stressed, and ultimately get better grades in school. On the other end of that, we also help kids to prepare for college through the SAT, the ACT, and even a whole college counseling program to help them get into the college of their choice. But along the way, whenever we start with kids, everybody has one thing in common. There is a certain level of stress that can turn into anxiety. But before we start on the nitty gritty today and introduce Rachael to you, I want you to imagine that when your child is feeling anxious about an upcoming test, they actually have the strategies to study effectively and calm their worries. I want you to imagine that when your child has a project or something that's due 2 weeks from now, they have the strategies to break it down and get started independently. And finally, I want you to imagine that your child knows how to seek out resources when he or she is stuck. They know how to ask for help and figure out how to approach this new task instead of going it alone. All those things can be possible. And really, that's our goal today, is to get parents to that point to be able to help their child. So let me introduce Rachael. Rachael, thank you for being my guest today.
Thanks for having me.
Rachael is an executive function coach here with me at Educational Connections. And not only does she work directly with kids day in and day out, but Rachael also heads up our professional development for all of our staff members, all of our educators, tutors, executive function coaches here at the company. Her background is as a teacher. She was both a high school teacher and also taught at the college level. She has an M.A. in literature and a master's degree in secondary education. So Rachael, we're going to talk about a lot today when it comes to anxiety, but tell us what this is and what this is not.
So as we talk about anxiety, we're going to be using some terms that are appropriate to more of like a psychological definition. And that's so that we can talk about educational strategies. This isn't a diagnosis. This isn't a one-size-fits-all quick fix kind of strategy. But if you know that you have a youngster in your life that is dealing with academic anxiety, having some educational strategies in your back pocket is going to really help.
Yes, for sure. So what might that look like in kids if they're feeling anxious in school?
So there's three things that you may see, and these are the top three things that I see in my sessions as I work with kids for executive function. The first thing that we see is what's called inconsistent presentation. So anyone who deals with anxiety will have what's called an inconsistent presentation. And what this means is that anxiety isn't happening all the time. Academically, it could look like this. A kid is really struggling, really freaked out about science class, has struggled to get the homework in, but then can always get it in for math class, has no real fear about that subject. So that's an example of an inconsistent presentation where there is something that's causing anxiety. It's not happening all the time. You also see one of two sorts of like reactions to feeling anxious. One is avoiding tasks. And we, as older people, will always see that as procrastination. That's really an avoidance reaction to things. The other one that you will see is hyperfixation. If I'm going to give an example here. I just worked with a student the other day who is in a medical program and has their first microbiology exam coming up. And all the kid wants to do is talk about the microbiology exam. Has 4 other classes and homework, but oh my God, that micro exam, because that's the thing that is causing anxiety. So it's either that avoidance or procrastination or that hyperfixation. Now, all of these, as I'm describing them, is our third category of how this presents, and that is weak executive function skills. So if a kid is really anxious, you're going to notice that they are not so good at organizing. They might have poor time management. They might not be able to plan ahead.
Yeah, I see that too in a lot of kids, Rachel. So let's
Mhm.
talk a little bit about how we can help students alleviate it, especially when it comes to testing. Somebody in the chat mentioned standardized testing. Somebody else said when the pressure's on under time conditions. Um, Tell us a little bit about how some of these strategies like spaced practice can benefit students.
Yeah. Test anxiety, I think, is something we've all experienced, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I know when I was taking the praxis exam to become a teacher in the state of Pennsylvania, I had like this panic response. And for the first 20 minutes of that time test, I could not focus. That was one of the things that kind of led me into this, the study about this when I became a teacher. And one thing that really benefits kids if they're dealing with test anxiety is what's called spaced practice. Now, if a kid is really anxious about a test, you may see that hyperfixation where they want to cram every minute of the day. They want to have those little flashcards in the car, or they're flipping through a Quizlet. But I often tell students to think of studying this mental exercise like physical exercise. So if we do nothing but leg day every day at the gym, we're going to end up with noodle legs. If you cram a subject every single day, the same kind of like noodle leg feeling is going to happen to your brain. So spaced practice means that we encourage students to plan ahead, and this is also helping with executive functioning, so that they are putting space in between their study sessions. So here's like a little example. Let's say the test is on Friday and the kid definitely wants to study the night before. Plan a study session for Thursday. The break would be on Wednesday, no studying that day, but you study on Tuesday. That little break in between those two targeted studying sessions really helps kids to retain information, and it also helps to calm down some of those anxious feelings, because that space in between allows them to really see, what have I retained between the 2 days and what do I need to hit as I'm doing my study session.
So when they are studying, one thing I've noticed with anxious kids is they think that everything's is equally important.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my gosh, I have all this stuff to do. They
Mhm.
don't really think that actually, let's break this down. Maybe there isn't so much to do. And I know you're a big proponent of the stoplight system. Tell us
I
about
Yeah, I love a stoplight study guide. It is so simple. It's something that I do with students in sessions, and I use like the virtual tools that we have on Lesson Space, but it's something that you can do with a copy of a student's notes or study guide and 3 colors of highlighter: green, yellow, and red, or like in the highlighter packet, pink. And as a student is going through information, this is a paired activity. In the session, I have the students' notes and I ask them questions based on the notes or the study guide. As the student answers, I color code. If the student recalls immediately, they know that information, that's green. That's the stuff I really know, I'm good to go. If the student is a little bit like, I kind of remember part of it, and I know my teacher talked about that, they can recall bits of it, that is color coded yellow. That's the caution. I don't know it the best, I have to study it a little bit. If you get to one of those questions and the kid is like, oh my God, I know that was mentioned, I am not recalling, that is full stop, I need to study that information. When a student uses their study guide or their notes from class, what ends up happening is 60 to 70% of that page is bright green. And you have about, 30, 40% that is yellow or red. And then students have to study the yellow and red items. This also helps anxious students separate out what they know from what they truly have to study. And in my sessions, a lot of times when we make these stoplight study guides, kids feel a deep sense of relief. I've had students say, I didn't know I knew that much. Well, honey, you're taking these great notes every day and you answered all these questions correctly. It's really a way to visually separate out what they know and don't know, and it can calm down a lot of test anxiety.
I love that, Rachel. I know
Yeah,
a lot of our coaches use the stoplight
yeah, they
system,
do.
and here's an example of what it could look like.
Yeah. So these are two from sessions of mine. On the left-hand side is a student that is in college classes. I have a student that is in like this. I don't understand it. It's like an outer space program. I mean, I'm like have like a baby rocket scientist on my roster. And then on the right-hand side is a high school vocab list. As an ELA teacher, this is my bread and butter. But what you can see is that we have the color coding here, and then there are some parts in like blue that's my handwriting. But a lot of these kids' papers are green with little bits of yellow and red that they have to go over.
Thank you for sharing that, Rachel. I love that that's a relief for kids when they see, actually, I don't have to do all this work.
Yeah.
Name and notice is one of my favorite strategies. How is this used with kids?
So whenever I have students who are anxious in my sessions, one of the things that I try to do is to actively listen to how they are feeling and then to help them identify like what they are feeling and separate that out from the academics. And so this is like the first little name and notice thing that I try to do, help the student identify the feeling of anxiety. Some students will express things like, "Oh, I'm just not good in English." Or I never turn in my homework. And so I will start to have like statements and also clarifying questions that are getting more to the root of I'm feeling anxious about my academics. So phrases like, I get the feeling that you're feeling anxious about English class. Am I right about that? Am I off base? Like, what do you think about that statement I just made? Now, do you always feel anxious about English class, or is it recent? Like, is it this book you're reading? Is it this paper that you're doing? Because a lot of times then students can pinpoint, well, it isn't all the time. Last year in English, I was as cool as a cucumber, but all of a sudden my teacher has me reading Anna Karenina, which is 700 pages long, and I'm freaking out over here. So, like phrases and questions like this can really help students better articulate how they're feeling so they can tackle those academic issues.
And it's definitely better than don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Calm down. Stop
Yeah.
stressing out. We know those things don't work for kids.
Yeah. Well, and
um, but
I think like it's just something that we as grown-ups do because we want to like fix everything, you know? I think those are
totally,
like natural because like I do that. I know parents do that, but these questions can really help kids.
for sure.
Yeah.
So, what about triggers?
Yeah, this is another area of talking points that I use with students in sessions. And like, of course, all of these are things that, parents could talk about with kids. So whenever students have identified, like, yeah, I am anxious about academics, I will try to figure out, okay, what's the trigger here, right? The most significant cluster of these feelings. And so I have like clarifying statements and phrase and questions that I use. Like, hey, I noticed that you only want to talk about science in sessions, and you're spending a lot of time studying for that. I just worked with a student the other night who has 6 AP courses on their schedule. And this student only wants to do calculus right now. They have T's and Q's in APUSH. They have lecture notes in AP Environmental Science. But this calculus thing is just, I need to study calculus. I need to get ahead of this. And so by using these clarifying questions, like, hey, I notice you only want to talk about calc, or do you have a test in calc coming up? Or are you feeling like this in your other AP classes? By asking these clarifying questions the other night, my student told me, well, my AP test in calc is before all the other AP tests. And I only have 34 weeks instead of 36. And what if there's content that I've never studied and it tanks my grade on that AP test? So these are really ways for students to identify what is making me so freaked out right now about my schoolwork.
It's interesting that a student would be thinking that far ahead, but it
Yeah.
shows you the level of anxiety.
Hmm.
What about just validating kids' feelings?
Yeah. Sometimes you have students that come to sessions and they'll say this. I had a student that I was working with last year and we're working together this year. And the first time I ever met this student, they were really concerned about English, really anxious about it. And I said, well, what's going on? And the kid said to me, well, my English teacher hates me. And that's why I can't get a good grade. My knee-jerk reaction is to say, oh, kid, your English teacher doesn't hate you. I mean, as an English teacher myself, they probably hate a lot of things, but not you, you know. But as I listened to that student talk, I used phrasing like we have up on the screen here. You know what, honey? If I thought my boss at work hated me, it would be so hard for me to get projects done. It would be hard for me to talk to that person. I can understand if you feel that your English teacher hates you, you wouldn't even want to go to class. And so just like acknowledging how the kid is feeling, it can really open up the door for them to tell you more about why do they feel this way about the teacher? What's going on that is like fueling this little anxious thought in their heads?
That makes total sense. That
Hmm.
really, you know, being empathetic, being a good listener, asking the right
Yeah.
questions can make a huge difference. You mentioned in the very beginning when we started about hyperfixation and avoidance, and I'm wondering if we can go there next.
Yeah.
How do
So
you handle that?
So it hyperfixation and avoidance for me are like, the two sides of the devil's coin. If you're anxious, it's gonna be one of these, like the worst heads and tails ever. Avoidance, I think, is something that we as educators and parents in our session here really understand because it's procrastination, right? Avoidance is like an all or nothing mentality. I started noticing both of these things when I taught AP and honors classes. I have these really driven kids in my classroom for 12 years. When I taught at the university level, I was teaching PhD students how to write dissertations, and you would see avoidance as, well, it's all or nothing. I mean, why should I even do this homework if I can't turn it in perfect? I mean, if I can't get an A, I'm not going to get any kind of grade. And so that's kind of the thinking, and that's an anxious thought. Hyperfixation is a little bit different. That's when a kid is really focusing on one specific task or problem while they are ignoring everything else. So when I talk to kids, I use, student-friendly phrasing for this. And the first thing that I ask them is, are you in crisis mode right now? Like, are you just barreling through to get everything done for this project? And it can be that they really are getting a ton done, but it is at the cost of everything else. So yeah, that research paper, you have 50 sources, but kid, you haven't turned math homework in for 2 weeks because you are fixated on one thing. And one of the reasons that kids do this is because by focusing so hard on the future, they feel a sense of control. And what I say to kids is, honey, you are not looking at a crystal ball right now. You feel like you're telling the future because, oh, if I work on this 4 hours a day, I can just get it done and I can get that A. And that feels like control. But is it really control, or are you hyper fixated on one little thing?
How do you deal with that? What are some solutions around hyperfixation and avoidance?
The first thing I do is I gotta I know you love it too, Ann. Like I love.
I do so much.
Yeah. I feel like the Pomodoro method, like it really does help with so many things. The Pomodoro method, if you're not familiar, is a time tested time management strategy, and it was developed by a gentleman named Francesco Cirillo. When he was a university student, he had to read this sociology book. He hated it. He grabs his kitchen timer, sets it for 2 minutes, and forces himself to read. And that was one of those like light bulb moments where he started questioning, why could I pay attention if there was a timer? And he started to study the human attention span. He started to study productivity. Cut to today, he's one of the world's foremost experts on like time management. He works for like he works with places like Google. So this is like very in like the business world, but also in the education world. And here's the gist of the Pomodoro method. You utilize the human attention span, which is 25 minutes, and you use a timer to kind of supercharge that. So you set a timer for 25 minutes, and the rule is you work for those 25 minutes. No scrolling on your phone, no setting up your playlist, no like making a cup of tea. It's 25 minutes of focused work. And then also using the timer, you set a timed 5-minute break. And students often use these in our executive function and subject-specific sessions to get some work done in the session. When I have a student who is anxious, I use that 5-minute break, not for like, go get a glass of water, go, mainline TikTok. I use it as 5 minutes of reflection. In a session, I do what I call a mini Doro, where I do 15 minutes instead of 25, because for an anxious student, that's really manageable. And the goal is, let's see what high quality work you can get done in this short time frame. And then when we have the reflection, I ask questions like this. Tell me what was working for you in those 15 minutes. How did it feel to get that work done? If a kid is avoidant, what happens is the 15 minutes is really manageable. Well, yeah, I mean, this math is going to take me 2 hours, but I could probably do 15 minutes. And then they can see, oh my goodness, I got so much done. It's probably not going to take me that long. If a kid is hyperfixated, they can really reflect on the high quality work that they got done in a short amount of time and start to conceive of the fact that they don't have to work for hours. They can do really high quality things and they can limit their time on task.
I'm a huge fan, Rachel.
Yeah, yeah,
I
me
use
too.
I use timers for kids when they're really, really little, up through college, and they
Mhm.
really do work. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit if you don't mind. And I want to talk about something I mentioned at the very beginning, how kids can ask for help, really, how they can advocate for themselves. Because I know as parents, we often say, oh, go ask your teacher for help.
Yeah.
And then the kid never does. Or they
Yeah.
say they did it and they really didn't. Um,
Yeah.
tell us in your sessions, what are some strategies you use, and could parents use those for their kids?
Oh, these are great for parents because so many times the issue, this is my experience working with kids. The issue is the kids literally don't know what to say first. So if you give them a little conversation starter, that gets them in the door. I mean, I've had it before where I have worked with a kid and like had them write out a little index card, of what they're going to say. Because a lot of times kids will they will think, oh, if I talk to my teacher's going to think I'm dumb, But giving them conversation prompts that are also focused on self-advocacy really helps kids get the support that they need. I have a student who's in an international baccalaureate program in their high school, and they were struggling with a project that is in Mandarin. And they were asking me questions about it. Well, do you think I could do this? I could do that. I'm like, babe, I don't speak Mandarin. I can help you advocate to your teacher. Things like, hey, you know what? I'm having a hard time with this one section of Mandarin translation. Do you remember when we learned about this like phrasing? Is there a time that we could meet and maybe I could work with you one-on-one? Simple sentences like this that for us as grown-ups are so easy. These are like pulling teeth for kids, and giving them these conversation starters and practicing with them how to ask these questions and start these conversations. These really help any anxious kid.
I totally agree with you. They just need the language to go in there.
Yeah,
And so there's, in one way, we're helping them, have that verbal conversation. But so much of what kids do these days is online.
yeah,
I know you love this template, and I
do.
know all of our coaches use this because it really does work.
Yeah. I load this into lesson space. This is the most boring Mad Libs ever, but it's the most effective Mad Libs ever. Because a lot of times when there will be students that are just anxious to talk out loud too. And so I always offer this as a solution. Let's email your teacher together. let's fill out this email template. Generally, when kids see this, it's so simple. It's like, oh, I have to just like write 4 sentences. Yeah, let's write 4 sentences and let's send that to your teacher. And you're going to get feedback in writing. That also is really effective for kids because whenever they're then, afraid about what the teacher said in sessions, we can review it if it's an email. Let's go back, honey, open up that email. What did your teacher say? Honey, she's saying she can meet with you any Friday. Let's pick a Friday and put it on your calendar. It's great for them.
I agree. And then this is ultimately what it looks like, if in case that you're wondering.
Yeah, it's just, they're great. They're great little professional emails.
I agree. And it's hard for kids to come up with this themselves, but
Yeah,
using that template is helpful. I want to go back to timers because we have a question in the chat,
yeah.
Rachel. Julie is asking, what if timers make your child more anxious?
Yeah, I saw that too, Julie. I was like, oh, I want to get to that one because that is the plum of the question about timers. So here's my little insider, info on timers. The first thing is you want to get one that doesn't make noise. And the thing about the timer is it isn't a race. A lot of times when you introduce a timer into like a work session, kids will think, "Oh, I got to do I got to do it as fast as possible." And so the timer has to be coupled with good communication. We are not going for quickness. We are going for quality. And the other thing that can really help is if a timer is like that constant tick, 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 that can turn into like water torture, where that's all that you can hear, that's all that you can like feel, emotionally. So one thing that I like is a timer that doesn't make any noise until it is done with its little cycle. And you can even take the timer and then like stuff it somewhere, like a desk drawer, or if you're doing this paired with a student, like, and this is something that's really beneficial in an executive function coaching session. I have the timer in my office and my kid is in like their workspace at home. So they only hear that the time is up when they hear the timer go off. And that is really effective because they don't know when it's going to go off. And that communication of we're looking for quality. Let's see how much quality work you can do in just a short amount of time. No race. No, you don't have to produce any amount of stuff. We're doing this as an experiment. And that normally breaks down those walls of, oh my God, I got to do this so quick,
I also like it. Number one, kids feel a lot of success after they're done. But number two, for kids that are so distracted, if they know, okay, I'm gonna put my phone in the other room. I'm gonna like X out of all my open applications on my laptop, and I only have to do that for like the mini Doro, which I love
Yeah.
that name, for 15
Yeah.
minutes or for 25 minutes or whatever time. It's like that's doable. If you say to your kid, you can't have your phone for 2 hours, like really? So
Yeah.
it does help kids feel successful for sure.
Mhm.
Um, I wanted to ask, do you ever use tasks? Like if the kid is really, really super anxious over timers, do you ever teach kids, oh, let me fold my worksheet in half and just do the first half, or let me just do these 5 problems in math, and then does that
Yeah.
work too?
Oh yeah, that is such an amazing strategy. I have a student that this is a college student transitioned into a biology program. Completely left the former major, which was like writing. So this is a massive shift, right? And when this kid started in the bio program, it was there was such like hope and happiness for the future, but it was like kind of like, oh God, what have I done? And every assignment was torture to get done. And so what we did was we set up like new documents where we chunked information, where it was like, okay, you have this Google Doc from your professor, and these are the pre-lecture notes. What if we took that and we separated it out into 4 mini tasks? And then we gave it like a day. We had a time associated with it, and we also had a reward. And then like training wheels, we eventually got it where this student could then open up those new lecture note documents and just go through them, could chunk everything on their own. But those types of things where it's like fold the paper in half, don't worry about, numbers 7 through 10 or whatever. Just do these couple at the top. That is such a great way to help kids manage everything they have to do.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So, Rachel, tell us a little bit more about what you do with coaching. Why do you think it's so powerful? I love this screenshot of you, by the way,
Yeah.
with the student. That's so cute.
Yeah, that Riley is a little bit of a goofball. And so like that's just a joy for me because I love working with young people and I just get like the sweetest sweetie pies on my roster. But the beautiful thing about executive function coaching is, first of all, it is a truly a safe space. So it is where the kid is comfortable. For high schoolers, we're meeting at the kitchen table, at the kid's desk. For my college students, at the desk in the dorm room, in the library, at the Starbucks, a place where the kid feels comfortable, but also the online space is very comfortable. It's absolutely private. Nobody knows that you're meeting with somebody. Nobody sees you going anywhere. It's on the kid's schedule and in a place where the kid has privacy to talk about academic issues. And then everything is tailored to the student. So, like when I work with Riley versus when I work with other kids, we may be using the same strategies. But, like, if Riley says to me, you know what, lady, this Pomodoro thing is great for some, but it's not really clicking with me, we pull other strategies out of the toolbox and we find what works best for him as a learner. And it also gives kids another like trusted adult that they can talk to. And so many times, this is like actually my favorite thing, Anne. Like I'll say something to a kid about their academic skills, and like I'll give them advice, and they'll be like, my mom said that. I always go with, well, your mother's brilliant, number one. But it is nice for kids to be able to have somebody else to talk to. The other thing is, I'm a teacher who's not grading them. So if they tell me something like, my English class is as boring as all get out, and, my math teacher is a drip, I'm not coming back with them, well, you really have to get an A. I'm asking them, why do you feel that way? How can we make it more motivating for you? And it's a good objective opinion because I am providing like some pushback. My number one phrase in sessions is, that's a great idea that you have. I do want to challenge that a little bit. And then give them some other ways to like rethink and reframe.
I like that. And you are that person who can say, I want to challenge that with you.
Yeah.
And whereas as a parent, if a parent said that, it may not go so well. All right. So I know you use the 4-step process that all of our coaches use. Can you tell us about that real quick?
Yeah, so every one of our sessions has this 4-step process. I have this on a sticker on my computer to keep me honest and make sure that I'm doing it every single session, every single time. The first thing that we do is after 2 minutes of pleasantries, how was that volleyball game? How do you like that new driver's license? We open up the learning management system and the student shares their screen. And we look at what is due, sometimes what's past due, what is coming up, what is going on in all of your classes. So we check tests and assignments. Then we move on to making a plan. So my student that I mentioned before that has those 6 AP classes, okay, we have A push T's and Q's. We have this new calc class. We have research seminar. How do we put these assignments into your week and then you still have time to do the things you want to do? So we prioritize work, but we also prioritize like a kid version of work-life balance so that kids are still motivated to do their work because it's not the only thing that they have to do. In the session, we always have a work session, and that's where we tackle the most worrisome assignments. So that might be a 15-minute mini Doro. That may be something where I just worked with a college student the other day and we worked on brainstorming a speech in his business presentation class where we work together, we take notes, we share, but it also may be 15 minutes of focused work where the student works solo, and then we come back together, collaborate, and reflect. At the end of the session, we do a lot of reflection and we anticipate obstacles. So after doing some work and after going through the session, we look at things and go, okay, so you also have a football game on Friday. So is doing that math homework on Friday going to be good, or should we move this around? Because we want students to have planning and executive function that fits in with their real lives, not just something that looks pretty on paper.
We had a couple of questions, Rachel. Number one is, let me ask this one first. I'm going to go back to the one about homework. But
Yeah.
have you ever had a kid that's not a good fit, that, you're just like, oh, you're too far gone, I cannot help you? Um, if anything like that ever occur? Do you find, I know with that a lot of that our coaches use stages of change. How do
Mhm.
you help students that maybe you're really resistant?
Well, I have had incredibly resistant students. I had a student that I'm now in my second year of working with this student who had a lot of anger, a lot of the way I'm going to phrase it is academic anger. Did not want to do anything. And the beautiful thing about our sessions is that you can develop rapport with a student and you can get to the root of why does the kid feel this way. And the other thing I want to address about this brilliant question that I'm also reading now in the chat is that all of our students are paired with a coach that knows what is going on with that student. So when I had this student who was angry, that was something that our managers talked with the family about and talked with the student about. So that when I met this student, I knew, okay, this kid doesn't want to do academics. This kid is like resistant, but has to get through school. So that pairing process also meant that I came to the session with a variety of strategies that were already kind of tailored to this kid's needs. And then we worked together, and this kid's still still angry about academics to this day, but will come to a session saying things like, you know what, I'm raising my voice, but not at you. I don't want to do my math today. Okay, that I can accept. So I think that the sessions gave that student a space with that, like we talked before, like that trusted adult, where this kid knew I could come in, this lady is going to listen to me, is here to help me, and this was a last ditch effort for this family. And this kid is now in college. So, I mean, like, and I know that I'm not the only coach who has these success stories. Every coach I talk to on our team, you go down their roster and they have a kid like this. So, and I really think it's about the process that Educational Connections does of really connecting the right coach or teacher with the right kid.
Yeah, you're right. That's a big part of our job. And every morning at 10 o'clock, we meet as a team and we talk about the kids that came in the day before, the parents we've talked to, and we determine who's going to be like the most amazing fit for this particular child. And we really, really, really work hard to hand match based on personality, skill set, all those things. All right, along those lines, let me get to the other questions in just a second. If we can be of help to you, whether it's, a subject tutor, an executive function coach, like what Rachael does, test prep or college consulting, we're happy to help you. Happy to talk to you on the phone to see what's going on with your child, their history, what your goals are for your student, and to see if what we offer is a match. And if not, you will come away from the call with some really great tips and strategies to chart your path forward. Jennifer, Kathy, and Ann Stewart all specialize in working with families when kids do need a little bit of help to overcome obstacles. You can either scan this QR code or you can go to our website at ectutoring.com/get-started. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful start to your fall. Take care and bye-bye.